let me tell you exactly what we are tracking tonight. Multiple stories, including this deadly, horrific school shooting in Georgia. We have an update on that during tonight's newscast. There are also some very serious revelations about the ongoing scandals surrounding the Supreme Court and the conduct of Clarence Thomas and his wife. We have that. And by the middle of the program, I'm going to share with you my report on the MAGA playbook and accountability in the age of Trump, why they want you to be tired and you might want to resist. So all of that is coming up. I want you to know what we're doing on what is a serious news day. We begin our top story with what is one of the top political stories in the country, the general election underway. Donald Trump has a light schedule this week. Kamala Harris has a busy one. She's on offense campaigning in New Hampshire on abortion rights.
Freedoms. You know how hard people fought for these freedoms and that they are foundational to who we are and what we stand for as America, including the fundamental freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government telling her what to do.
You can hear Harris, the nominee's enthusiasm, as well as the crowd. And remember, this is not something that Democrats in past cycles before Roe have run on, or that, before Roe fell, Republicans have run so quickly away from. Consider that the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, has been tied up in knots over this issue. He now claims he's against the Republican abortion crackdown in Florida and that he would vote for a Democratic effort to limit that crackdown. Obviously, that is a difficult position for a politician to uphold because he's basically suggesting he might vote for the thing in Florida to stop the thing he did when he was president. Harris hitting that issue, but also building out her agenda with new small business and jobs plans. She campaigned on that as well and criticized Donald Trump's record.
He plans to give billionaires massive tax cuts and to cut corporate taxes by over $1 trillion, even as they pull in record profits. His plans will add more than $5 trillion to the national debt. He also wants to impose what in effect is a national sales tax. And that is on top of the $2 trillion tax cut. We know how to count. We know how to count.
Harris talking about counting up how this all works and balancing what is a populist message with some outreach to certain businesses, at least small businesses. It turns out, according to early analyses, and again, she's only been the nominee for a little while here, her plans could actually be better for U.S. economic growth than Donald Trump's tariff plans. That's according to the Wall Street firm Goldman Sachs. You see the headline. And that kind of cosign is interesting because Harris famously took on Wall Street as the AG of California. She fought bankers to secure a historic $18 billion settlement for the people harmed by the banks and the mortgage industry. And I can tell you, back before she was headlining this Democratic convention, Kamala Harris was explaining her work and how to take on those banks and use the law and fair rules, she said, to help people at a different convention. We have a deep cut all the way back to the Democratic convention of 2012.
Well, I've seen all that happens when you roll back those rules. What happens are rows of foreclosure signs. What happens are mountains of family debt. What happens is a middle class that's hurting. That's what we've seen in towns across California and across this country. When it comes to the housing crisis.
That's when it comes to the housing crisis. The Harris campaign argues that not only what's old is new again, but that the record, she's one of the more experienced nominees we've seen in a first bid for the White House. The record shows she's serious about this. Now, Donald Trump is not out campaigning. He will be seen today taping a town hall with Sean Hannity. That airs tonight. Against this backdrop, you have to look at how it's all playing. I've emphasized to you it's early in a race that seems late into the general election because of the nominee swap. But we're starting to see data and evidence beyond just the fundraising about what's happening. 1 million new voters now registering, with over 376,000 since Biden left the race. And because the way we vote has changed in America and shows no signs of changing back, we talk about an election day. That's a placeholder from a bygone era. We actually have election weeks in many states. And Trump allies are openly asking if Republicans have not fully adjusted to that, in addition to how Donald Trump has discouraged some of the basic ways that it is legal to vote, like voting early by mail. So you have allies in Fox asking if Republicans are blowing the key early vote mobilization, which begins within 2 weeks.
I think it's going to be very interesting to see how successful Republicans have been about getting out the early vote. They're not going to be able to cry wolf twice on this. They've had 4 years to figure this out.
They've had years to figure it out. So how does this actually work on the ground in the key states that matter? And what about all this talk of the economy, something that Harris is clearly driving? And I wonder, is there someone with experience on the ground in tough national political races who also knows a thing or two about the economy and how to politic on it? Who could that be? I'm thinking of James Carville, the perfect guest for exactly today's news cycle when we're back in 90 seconds.
Someone who suggests we should terminate the Constitution of the United States of America should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States.
Democratic nominee Kamala Harris spitting what is technically known as hot fire. James Carville, the legendary Democratic strategist, is my special guest, lead off on a big night, and his most recent piece in the New York Times lays out Harris's best strategies to defeat Trump at next week's debate. Welcome, James.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Dealer's choice. You want to start with the debate or the economy?
The economy.
Go ahead.
So since 1989, in job creation, it's 50 million under Democrats, 1 million under Republicans. I defy somebody to compare the growth rate since 1989 among Democratic and Republican presidents. You would find a gigantic advantage for Democrats. I have no idea why the press or the financial people just don't look at the historical record and tell us what it is. 50 to 1. That's a big number. If you get beat 50 to 1, you're getting beat bad, really bad. And that's the jobs number that President Clinton pointed out at the convention. And if they fact checked it and said, well, you know what? He's exactly right. 50 million to 1 million. So you want a strong economy? Vote Democratic.
You know, Kamala Harris has been known as someone who is a realist, a pragmatist, who can sit across the table with people and make a plan and a deal. But she's also known as tough on the banks and not a pushover. I've covered that history on this program. And so it's interesting in that context that she is out here not waiting around for the debate or waiting around for a new theme or only running on the quote-unquote freedom theme, which is important. They're pushing his economic plans, including trying to help small businesses. And over on Fox Business, which is not exactly Harris Central, James, they had some commentators who said, well, they had to admit or they like this for business. Take a look.
I just want to press the point. When a political candidate comes up with what I think is a good idea, I have to call it a good idea. And a $50,000 tax cut for small, not tax cut, but a tax credit for startups or small businesses, coupled with less red tape. I got to say, that is a good idea, regardless of our other tax ideas.
While that may be a good idea.
The final maybe there is from the RNC chair. Your thoughts?
Well, it's a different philosophy. She's saying if we do small businesses, we grow these small businesses, then you're going to grow the entire economy. The Trump plan is if we just give billionaires more tax cuts, the money will get to us eventually. And I don't know about you, but I deal with small businesses multiple times a day. I deal with billionaires 3 times a year. So I come into contact with a lot more small businesses and a lot more involved in my life and employ a lot more people. And I think it's a distinction that's worth noting, and it's a distinction that look at the record, 50 to 1. It's big. And we know that this works, that if you invest in small business, you invest in education, students, that kind of thing, you're gonna have an economy that perks up, not trickles down.
Turning to the debate, you've been around many of these presidential debates. This one is particularly high stakes. These two people have never debated, let alone even met. We expect high numbers. The floor in the summer, when fewer people were paying attention with Biden, was about 50 million. We expect a lot more than that next week. We can report tonight the campaigns have agreed on the muted mic system, which is what they used in that summer debate. You have been thinking about this. What do you think is key for Harris?
Well, first of all, people know Trump much better than Harris. So Harris it's got a lot of introducing left to do, and that's very important for her. The second thing is you're exactly right. America loves a train wreck. They saw a train wreck on June 27th. They're going to tune back in, hoping that they see another train wreck, because people love train wrecks. And I think this is sometimes we overhype debates. We overhype the importance of debates. I think in this one, it might be a little bit worth the hype here. We'll see how it turns out. And he kind of needs this. And she needs it, too, because she needs a platform to really introduce herself to the voters of America. People know about her, but don't quite know her yet.
Yeah, I take your point. I mean, I remind folks the 2020 Biden-Trump debate had over 70 million live views, and it further cemented, amidst COVID, the idea of getting Trump out, not for even all the reasons that legitimately people have criticized him for, racism, sexism, attacks on the law and rule and order, but it really cemented the idea that he was out of touch and not up to the job on COVID. You just referenced the so-called train wreck, which really, that debate more than anything else upended this year. We all understand that. So it's big next week. Harris has continued to improve over the years as a campaigner. I think even Republicans have acknowledged that in their own way. But even back last cycle, she had a strong run against the Trump agenda in Pence. Take a look.
We don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and supporting our African-American neighbors and all of our minorities.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country. I am the only one on this stage who has personally prosecuted everything from child sexual assault to homicide.
In your piece, you write about what she should do. How does that moment stand out? And how much of it is about her reminding people who she is, as you say, just literally far less famous and known than Donald Trump?
Well, it's very effective, but remember, crime is down 30%. The Biden-Harris administration has a stellar record on fighting crime. A big part of her resume that I would like for her to talk about is a time as Attorney General of the largest state and how she intervened on behalf of consumers. I think when people find that out, that she has a pro-consumer attitude and is against this price fixing and far capping insulin costs, and then she can show how she fought against corporate power and corporate pricing power, it's going to go a lot better, I promise you.
Yeah. And James, I appreciate it. Looks like you're getting other calls, but you're staying in the live TV interview instead of taking the other call. I appreciate that. We all know you could take the other call.
Whoever's calling me, stop. Don't call me between 6 and 6:30.
I wanted to get your take on, look, there's a lot of political talk out there, but, Politico has real reporting, this isn't just sort of speculation, about Republicans who say they've had it, it's a tight race, and if Trump actually lost, they could rebuild instead of being stuck with him. Quote, Republicans wishing for a Trump loss include long-standing GOP figures throughout the nation who bleed red and wouldn't dare say this publicly, but who are more than ready to move on from the Trump era. What does that mean? Does it affect anything in the campaign, or is it the usual D.C., talk?
A little bit more. Eric Erickson, who's very, very conservative, lives in Macon, is actually from Jackson, Louisiana, right north of Baton Rouge. And he says that they might benefit from a blowout. And remember, the Republicans got blown out in 64 and won the presidency in 68. Democrats got blown out in 72, won the presidency in 76. So what I tell my Republican friends, if you want your party back, if you want a kind of pro-business, lower tax, lighter regulatory touch, stand erect at attention during the anthem, the only way you're going to get that back is through a blowout. If Harris gets 280 electoral votes, it's not going to change. And I think there's a growing recognition of that, not just from kind of elite Washington never-Trumpers, but there's going to be a sense of that on the ground also.
Yeah, super interesting, and you pull the history, and it goes to that. But some of it's generational. The people who are middle and younger in the Republican Party understand that there will be other chapters and decades, and when do they want to begin that process, as you say. James, like I said, star guest for tonight, and thank you for staying on the line. Long-time listener.
Thank you.
Thank you.
50 to 1. 50 to 1. Thank you.
There you go. James Carville giving us the briefing. I want to tell you what's coming up ahead. We are going to draw the link between Kamala Harris's withering cross-examination of Bill Barr under oath, and I'm going to show you that moment and why it matters, and draw the line from there to Donald Trump trying to get his campaign manager from 16, Corey Lewandowski, to commit what many prosecutors viewed as obstruction in the Mueller probe. And if some of this sounds old, believe me, that's part of the point. They want you to forget it. They will defy and lie to make you forget it. But Corey Lewandowski was caught lying under oath, and I confronted him about it, and I have a few more words for him tonight in our next segment. So that's coming up. First, we turn to that terrible story I mentioned at the top of the hour. This is in Barrow County, Georgia. That's near Atlanta. A teenage gunman entering Appalachia High School today and opening fire.
There are 4 individuals who are deceased from this incident, 9 that have been taken to local hospitals with various injuries. Of those that are deceased, 2 are students and 2 are teachers.
Authorities have a 14-year-old suspect in custody who was a student at the school. He is alive. Early reports, and this is a fast-moving and terrible story, are that he would be charged as an adult. At 14, he should not have legally had the gun. Authorities are investigating how he got it. But the way that people can get guns legally and illegally in America is the backdrop for these stories. They happen so frequently, this one at a level that so many people are watching. We can also tell you Vice President Harris addressing the news today.
This is just a senseless tragedy on top of so many senseless tragedies. And it's just outrageous that every day in our country, in the United States of America, that parents have to send their children to school worried about whether or not their child will come home alive. It's senseless. It is. We've got to stop it. And we have to end this epidemic of gun violence in our country once and for all.
A terrible shooting there at that Georgia high school. We are continuing to monitor it with our reporters on the ground, and we'll bring you updates as warranted. Trump and Harris face off in this debate in exactly 1 week, and that's a forum where Trump has previously threatened to jail his opponent, as he infamously did to Hillary Clinton. And it is illegal for any U.S. politician to order such selective prosecutions. But Donald Trump has continued exactly those threats this year, including as his so-called revenge for his own lawful indictments and trials. Harris allies see her as a calm prosecutor who can handle any of that. And she memorably grilled one of Trump's most loyal appointees, Attorney General Barr, about this very issue. The question was, had he been asked by Trump or White House officials to open criminal investigations of specific people, which you're not supposed to do? And she drew headlines for that exact hearing and putting Barr on defense. And he had to kind of mince words and, as you're about to see, ultimately kind of say he didn't know, rather than just be able to say under oath, no, Trump didn't ask for that. It never happened.
Attorney General Barr, has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone?
I wouldn't.
Yes or no?
Could you repeat that question? They have not asked me to open an investigation, but
Perhaps they've suggested?
I don't know. I wouldn't say suggest.
Hinted?
I don't know.
Barr dodging a straight answer. He was under oath, so directly lying to Congress could be a crime. And he knew it was bad to admit that Trump or even his team was demanding such investigations. And we also know from the evidence, reporting, and facts, Bill Barr did inject himself into individual cases for Trump allies and Trump's political benefit and even secrecy over alleged ongoing plots. Barr used his power to leak and spin the findings of the Mueller probe and to dismiss the case against Trump aide Flynn and to reduce jail time for Trump aide Roger Stone. That drew, I should say, resignations and protest from nonpartisan career DOJ prosecutors. This matters. Some Trump allies want to fool you with propaganda or make you as cynical as they are. They claim nothing matters, or Trump can confess to anything and get away with it. The record shows something else. Bill Barr wanted to avoid confirming there were any orders to help those Trump aides. He didn't want to put that on the record. And Kamala Harris asked a strong question with strong follow-up that helped flush some of that out. And other Trump lawyers and operatives would rather say they don't remember the trick he used or even invoke the fifth rather than tell the truth about, apparently, things they did that were improper or maybe even illegal for Donald Trump.
I assert my Fifth Amendment right against being compelled to be a witness against myself.
Fifth, and executive privilege. Fifth.
I don't have any recollection of this. I don't know what I meant by it, or I don't recall.
And I don't specifically recall.
Here is the playbook, and it matters for this election. It matters for the next 2 months. The playbook is dodge questions or lie in public, duck or delay testifying under oath, where those same lies would then become a potential crime. If you then have to testify, dodge by claiming you don't recall. And sometimes that could be a truthful answer. Sometimes there's so much evidence that becomes an unbelievable or illegal answer. If later evidence contradicts your testimony, then claim it's all late and old news, even though the delays were the thing that the Trump team caused to begin with. So you blame others for the delays that you caused. So take the same Mueller probe that Bill Barr was spinning as he discussed it with Kamala Harris. The Mueller report busted many attempts to interfere in independent DOJ probes of the Trump administration, including then-President Trump asking his first 2016 campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, to interfere in that Mueller probe. And they used this playbook. First, Lewandowski dodged in public. Only when forced under oath by Mueller's dogged prosecutors did Lewandowski admit, and we now know this from the report, he admitted that Trump asked him to have Sessions try to end the Mueller probe's scrutiny of past election interference. And Trump wanted Lewandowski to dictate a message for Sessions to say. Trump trying to use Lewandowski as a kind of cutout ghostwriter. And this was a big deal and rare. It was, quote, the first time the president had asked Lewandowski to take dictation, according to Lewandowski's own testimony, as finally, honestly, in that setting, explained in the Mueller report. So Lewandowski admitted that to prosecutors. He also lied about it in public. It was not until a cross-examination at a House hearing that he had to fess up. The New York Times reporting Lewandowski confirming in that testimony the president had once asked him to help curtail the scope of the Russia investigation, possibly obstructing justice. We have the evidence, we have the testimony, we have the receipts. Admitting that contradicted Lewandowski's claims in an MSNBC interview, which was such a big deal to House investigators, they admitted it as evidence against Lewandowski and used it to confront him when questioning him under oath, and they drew another admission, which matters right now as he's rejoined the Trump campaign. Lewandowski under oath saying he can be dishonest with the media.
Prior to the Mueller report being published in redacted form, did you ever misrepresent what you did on behalf of the president?
I can't think of an instance where that would have occurred. I don't ever remember the president ever asking me to get involved with Jeff Sessions or the Department of Justice in any way, shape, or form ever.
Did you hear that, sir? That was you saying on MSNBC, you don't ever remember the president ever asking you to get involved with Jeff Sessions or the Department of Justice in any way, shape, or form. That wasn't true, was it, sir?
I heard that.
And that was not true, was it?
I have no obligation to be honest with the media just because they're just as dishonest as anybody else.
So you're admitting, sir, you were not being truthful in that clip, correct?
My interview with Ari Melber?
Yes.
Can be interpreted any way you'd like.
So you're admitting that on national television you were lying there?
What I'm saying is they have been inaccurate on many occasions, and perhaps I was inaccurate at that time.
Inaccurate. Lewandowski is now back serving on Trump's current campaign. And he joined us on the beat last week for the first time since that hearing and that last interview. And we held him accountable. And in fairness, we gave him a chance to address all this and asked why people should believe him now. And Mr. Lewandowski was completely unwilling or unable to offer a substantive answer.
I have no obligation to be honest with the media just because they're just as dishonest as anybody else. Perhaps I was inaccurate at that time.
Do you admit that you were stating that falsely at the time?
Ari, listen, here's the deal, man.
If you admit under oath that you were not telling the truth, it is relevant now, and now you seem to be unable to address that.
Ari, listen, we've been down this path, okay?
Well, we haven't. This is your first time back since the path.
Ari, that interview was 4+, almost 5 years ago to the day, to be very honest with you.
This is now your chance to address this, and you're not addressing it. That's fine. Almost 5 years ago. That's the playbook. Dodge, delay, admit it under oath if you have to do that to avoid possible jail risk, and then blame everyone else for your own delays. 5 years ago, old news. Now, if this all sounds exhausting to deal with? It can be. That's what they want. They want to grind everyone down. Now, that new interview brought plenty of headlines about Lewandowski lying again. He has been busted lying. He had to admit lying under oath. He admitted under oath that he does dishonest things with the media. And then you saw afforded time in a fair forum that other colleagues of his and Republicans and Trump officials have used. It didn't go as poorly for them as it did for him. He had no good answer. He lies. He lies again. And his failed effort to deflect draws those headlines. Fine. That's the Trump playbook. Other aides who try to defy going under oath, meaning going even farther than him and just not participating, as you saw in those kind of hearings, some of them have landed in prison. Donald Trump spent years trying to duck even testifying in that recent New York fraud case. But when he lost and started facing penalties for it, well, the playbook was under pressure. He had to sit under oath, just like so many of his aides.
Breaking news out of New York. A state appeals court has ruled that former President Donald Trump must testify in the civil investigation. The former president has been fighting tooth and nail to not have to testify.
He fought like hell to get out of it unsuccessfully.
Trump spent his morning at a New York City office being deposed under oath by lawyers from the New York Attorney General's team.
That deposition and Donald Trump's inability as a civil defendant to provide decent defenses under oath became evidence in a fraud trial which Trump not only lost, but lost terribly. The penalty and legal fees approaching $500 million. Hundreds of MAGA criminals have faced consequences as defendants in the Jan 6 cases, and many top Trump aides and lawyers have been indicted or convicted in multiple jurisdictions, as you can see here, and those cases continue through the courts. Donald Trump's own coup trial was delayed and complicated by a favorable ruling he got from the Supreme Court, so that's pushed out past November. And we should note, for accuracy here, some parts of Trump's playbook did work when he was president. Deny, defy, delay, and he basically dangled pardons and then used them for certain aides like Roger Stone, who I mentioned also got help from Bill Barr, as an end run around that same Mueller probe we've been discussing that Donald Trump tried to kneecap with the help of Lewandowski.
If you helped the president in his efforts to benefit from and then downplay and then obstruct the investigation into Russia helping him get elected in 2016, tonight's another night of pardons for all y'all.
His former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, his former political advisor, Roger Stone.
Manafort and Stone were both prosecuted by Robert Mueller's special counsel team looking into Russian election meddling.
So, what is our takeaway here, other than the fact that you have to stay on the job and be fair, but also continue to do tough work and hold liars accountable? Well, one takeaway is a mixed verdict in how America does accountability. As you can see, some of that playbook has worked. And if other parts of the system give in to that exhaustion I mentioned or normalization, if parts of our broader society, the independent branches of government, the free press, then the cynical part of the playbook can work even better. I say mixed because, as I showed you, many other pages of this playbook have failed, from that massive fraud penalty to Lewandowski's public accountability to the even harsher convictions for those who were not as truthful when pressed under oath or got into other problems. And some of those people, as you see, are awaiting trial presumed innocent, some of them convicted, some of them in prison. We have heard a ton about institutions over the past few years. But let me repeat something tonight that you already know. Institutions are only as effective as their rules, systems, and the people who comprise them. Again, the people who comprise them. And that's not a partisan point. You see Liz Cheney on the screen as a lifelong conservative Republican. You see Jack Smith, an independent at DOJ, and Mr. Lewandowski, a frequent liar. Some of the institutions are deliberately walled off from public pressure. Others are actually supposed to be answerable to the public. And with everything that's now been publicly exposed, and we just showed a few key points tonight, the final arbiter of this in November is you. What kind of institutions do you demand? What will you accept as normal, as part of politics or out of bounds? And what does accountability look like? That is really up to the voters in November. And we have a bit more on this right after the break.
I have no obligation to be honest with the media just because they're just as dishonest as anybody else. Perhaps I was inaccurate at that time.
Do you admit that you were stating that falsely at the time?
Ari, listen, here's the deal, man.
If you admit under oath that you were not telling the truth, it is relevant now, and now you seem to be unable to address that.
Ari, listen, we've been down this path, okay?
Well, we haven't. This is your first time back since the path.
Ari, that interview was almost 5 years ago to the day, to be very honest with you.
This is now your chance to address this, and you're not addressing it. That's fine. Almost 5 years ago, we are joined by Vanity Fair's Molly Jong-Fast, an MSNBC analyst. What do you see there?
I mean, we were talking about this at the break. It's like the idea that there's a statute of limitations on lying, and after 5 years, it doesn't count as a lie anymore. Look, this is like this kind of pre-authoritarian gaslighting, right? Where it's, nothing is true, people get stuff wrong, so it's all lies, right? They're equating like mainstream media making mistakes with intentional lying, right? And it works, and sometimes it works. And if you look at the Arlington situation, the employee at Arlington declined to press charges because she was scared of the Trump campaign, right? And that's called obeying in advance. And it's something that Timothy Schneider, the Yale professor, talks about. And that is what the play here is. Make people scared, make people obey, make them not ask questions, and work the refs so that if they ask questions, they seem partisan.
Yeah, and the playbook matters because anytime you understand something, you're less likely to be tricked by it.
Right.
It's just no different than something online. And once you understand there are online scams, you have a different part of your brain activated. And so political and informational inoculation is part of this. And on the one hand, we've all been living like this for years. But on the other hand, I don't think it's unappealing to say to someone, well, that was a long time ago. The Mueller thing ended. We're here now. What are we even talking? That's not just targeted at the core MAGA audience. It's targeted at other reasonable ears.
Right.
Does it matter that he wasn't just lying about some random political squabble, but rather a plan hatched in the Oval Office dictated to him to try to potentially illegally shut down an independent probe of the Trump administration?
Right.
That was the lie was about.
Right. And I think that's a really important point. And this goes back to the Steve Bannon idea that you flood the zone with excrement, right? You make it so that there are so many stories that a normal, casual political observer doesn't know which way, it all sounds implausible. And so it's impossible to see this sort of real malice from everything else. And that's what we're seeing here. And yes, obviously, and again, I thought what you talked about before was so important. In some ways, the guardrails have held, right? In some parts, there are people like Steve Bannon who's sitting in jail right now. And then in some ways, it hasn't. I mean, Donald Trump has used millions of dollars to run out the clock. And now he's running for president just like a regular presidential candidate.
Yeah, and the institutions are made of people. There's also something that is different than certain types of lying where because part of the Trump movement views lying as scoring points in a video game, someone like Trump or Lewandowski can blatantly lie, but the supporters feel that they're in on it.
Right.
So they don't feel lied to. They feel that they're part of the trick, even if it's explained after the fact or haphazardly.
Yeah.
Donald Trump just sold out a lot of the people that went to prison for him on January 6th because we have the evidence. Some of them were confused. It's not a good criminal defense. That's why they're in prison.
Right.
But they were confused. Some of them really thought they were freedom fighters and that Donald Trump had actually won the election. Yeah. Point of fact, he lost.
Right.
Now, as some of them rot away in jail, he gives up the game and mentions he actually lost. He knows he lost. Here he was in an interview.
I became president. Then the second time, I got millions more votes than I got the first time. So I was told if I got 63 million, which is what I got the first time, you would win. You can't not win. And I got millions of more votes than that and lost by a whisker.
And lost.
Yeah.
Quote, and lost. What does it mean that the lies only move to benefit him And again, he's a PR guy. For whatever reason, he thinks that going into the general election that's tight, he's better off acknowledging the reality of the loss than continue to lie about it right now. Yeah. That's one interpretation. But a lot of people in prison go, wait, they thought for years there was an actual stolen election and they were on the right side of history.
Yeah, this is an interesting move right now, admitting that he's lost finally so close to the election. And clearly, I mean, I think Trump is sort of throwing stuff at the wall now because he's worried and he wants to change the trajectory of what's happening right now in the election 62 days before it happens. I do think it sells him out. And look, that's the thing, is that a lot of this is really dishonest for the purpose of helping Trump. And Trump's dishonesty is to help Trump. Corey's dishonesty is to help Trump. You know, this is to help Trump. I don't know that you can change course so late on reality. A lot of people's whole reality, their whole political reality, is the idea that Donald Trump was cheated. Yeah. And that he actually won, which is not true. Well,
and that's why the truth comes back, and you could say it's a partial good sign that the truth is more popular in the general election, and he can tell that, which is why, if you watch the Biden debate, he ran from January 6th. He didn't endorse the big lie. We just showed him admitting he lost. And he knows that the abortion stance is unpopular, so he's trying to change on that. I mean, anyone who says, oh, Donald Trump's an idiot who always does the same thing hasn't been paying attention. Right. He is shrewd enough, or his people around him shrewd enough, to say, you know what? You have a better shot with these voters right now by not sounding like a sore loser cry baby who's delusional and thinks he won. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, look, the scary thing is this is American democracy, right? Like, he has run against American democracy. So if he succeeds, you know, he has all this autocratic rhetoric, and he has really run as an autocrat. Yeah. And he said, you know, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. Ha ha, just kidding. But what he means is, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. So the stakes of this election are just so impossibly high. And a lot of Republicans have gotten involved in this authoritarian worldview, which is quite scary. So, yes, it's good he's backing away from it, but it's still really scary that we've gotten to this place. Yeah. Molly Jong-Fast, good to have you. Thank you. When we come back, we look at Clarence Thomas's widening scandals at the High Court. Breaking news right now, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who played such a key role leaving Republican leadership over the Jan 6 insurrection, then helped chair the committee looking into it. She announced tonight she is voting for Kamala Harris. The Cheney name means a lot in Republican politics, and while she is associated as a critic who crossed paths with Donald Trump, she is a deeply conservative official, and she has said this matters for swing states, and writing in names of protest candidates is not enough. She will be voting for Harris. That's news breaking tonight. Also turning to the Supreme Court news I mentioned, a new recording reveals Ginny Thomas, the wife of Clarence Thomas, backing an effort of a group that wanted to contain any effort to add ethics to the Supreme Court, which is striking because the ethics push comes from her own husband's ethics problems. Justice Thomas under fire for grifting, taking gifts, taking vacations, hiding them, private jet rides. Conservative legal groups, though, are opposed to any changes on the ethics front. And there was this moment in July when an activist read an email from Ginny Thomas during a call with donors.
I got an email today from Ginny Thomas, Justice Thomas's wife. And so I want to read that to you. I cannot adequately express enough appreciation for you guys pulling into reacting to the Biden effort on the Supreme Court. And then this is in all caps. You guys have filled the sails of many judges. Can I just tell you, and this is all caps, thank you so, so, so much.
So that's a verbal account of a participant reading the email, which was recorded. ProPublica, which has been on so many of these stories, obtained the recording. Ginny Thomas is basically working with a group that is trying to politically help her husband avoid transparency or ethics rules because of his own grifting, which benefits her and their household. The group's president also made the outlandish attack on Justice Kagan as, quote, treasonous. Take a listen.
That is incredible. Somewhat treasonous what Kagan did. The Chief Justice rules the court. They're trying to keep the other branches' hands off of them. And then you've got Kagan from the inside really being somewhat disloyal and somewhat treasonous in what she's doing.
Now, that is a point of view, but not backed by the treason law. Ginny Thomas, of course, has had a lot of problems in the past few years. She also was involved in efforts to steal the lawful election. As the wife of a Supreme Court justice, that could create conflicts. Justice Thomas refusing to recuse from those cases. Thomas and Alito continue to put a lot of heat on John Roberts' Supreme Court with their many ethics problems. So we wanted to get that update to you. I want to also remind everyone you can always reach me directly online at Ari Melber across social media. My question to you tonight, given our reporting, do you think that Trump playbook, defy, deny, delay, and blame others for delays, do you think it's working or running out of gas? You can tell me at Ari Melber or visit my newsletter at arimelber.com. I've heard from a lot of you there, so feel free to connect. If the internet's not your thing, that's fine. I'll be back here 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, and keep it locked on MSNBC for The Readout with Joy Reid now.